Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And today we are going to be talking about the Cilento.
Off the beaten path, or exploring off the beaten path.
Exactly.
We have titles and subtitles already ready.
Yeah, because we're good like that.
We're amazing like that. Before we get into that, though, we are first going to, there's 3-4 quick little housekeeping things we just want to run through, starting with there's now an American Pope. Last time we did an episode, there's no new Pope. There's now a new Pope. It's an American Pope. Kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Second was we are going to come out with an episode next week that is going to be kind of a continuation of the honest downsides to living in Italy. It's going to be the last episode on, pretty much the last episode on living in Italy, I think, until we want to talk about more, maybe about renting in Italy or something like that, something more tactile, something more specific and actionable.
Mm-hmm.
But we just wanted to, I think, round up the entire living in Italy segment
Yeah,
portion.
absolutely. And it's going to be a bit heavy, so just prepare yourself for that. But it is important.
And it's also why we are doing this episode. So it's kind of like breaking it up. Yay.
Yeah, today's a fun, light, happy episode.
Fun, light, happy episode. Exactly. And we are going to, after that one, or potentially at the same time with that one, to kind of put out a happy and a heavy episode at the same time for those of you who maybe don't want heaviness in your...
if you're not in a space for that, we
exactly.
understand.
We totally understand. So we are trying to put together another episode on renting a car that would come out at the same time. That way you have your choice. Renting a car in Italy, by the way, not renting a car like wherever you live, because that might be information you already know. Specifically, renting a car in Italy, the do's and don'ts, the things that watch out for, the pitfalls, et cetera, et cetera. And thank you all again so much. I just want to say a really big thank you to those of you who have donated to us.
Huge thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Incredibly generous, all of you. It means the world to us. Thank you. Honestly, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And if you'd like to follow us, you can do so on Spotify. You can do so on Apple Podcasts. You can do so on our social media, Instagram at Only a Bag Podcast, and then Blue Sky Only a Bag. You can go to our website, onlyabag.com, if you want to read any articles or subscribe to our newsletter, which as of currently, it hasn't really been put out yet at all. Because it's kind of like one of those things we're going to do once we get more steady in terms of like, I don't know, our system, but it's just nice to have the newsletter, I guess. If one of those things is like a monthly roundup of here's what you might have missed in the podcast and here's what we talked about. Mm-hmm. And it's just one of those things we want to start doing that potentially once we hit a certain threshold, because we don't start doing now, and then everyone feels like they missed a bunch of, backlog of newsletters.
Sure.
So yeah, that's on our website. And then last but not least, we have a email address, onlybagpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you'd like to ask us about some part of your trip, if you want to run an itinerary by us, if you just want to, you're going someplace and you're just curious about something, I want to be very clear. There are a lot of questions we cannot answer. If you're going to the Dolomites, our answer is going to be bring hiking boots, because we really don't know anything about the Dolomites. But if you're going to like Naples or Rome, we actually have some more recommendations for places like that.
Absolutely.
So that was just, I wanted to very quickly hit all of the big notes. And yes, if you'd like to donate to us as well, if you'd like to be one of our amazing, beautiful, incredibly generous contributors.
Angels. That's who you are.
Angel investors, which are a totally different thing, actually, now that I'm saying that out loud. I mean, not that much of a different thing. It's just giving money and hoping for the best, I guess, is what angel investors are. But you can do so at our coffee, ko-fi.com/onlyabag. I feel like I'm on NPR, but it's just pronounced coffee and it's spelled Ko-fi. And that will be linked in the description. There is absolutely no pressure to donate, and you don't really get anything in return besides our eternal gratitude, because it's not like a 501(c)(3) or something like that. You can't even write it off of your taxes. But you are...
That's a good point. Sorry about that.
I know. And we looked into it. We looked into our last project, which we were trying to turn into a 501(c), and that is not easy. Plus, it's a whole thing. So that might not be coming anytime soon. But we hopefully will instead provide something with y'all to take, like a quid pro quo, a transaction, I don't know. We were trying to...
Like a fun little thank you.
A fun little thank you, like a little postcard, like a little something that's like, oh, I can't believe these people sent me something. That's so cool.
We're working on trying to make that happen.
Like one piece of pasta for everybody who sends a thing.
Just
taped to the postcard. I don't know, something fun.
Splatter it with tomato sauce.
Yeah, it'll be terrible. You get it and you're like, that's disgusting. I wish I didn't donate to you people. Or we could just send it to everybody and you donate to Stops. That's terrible.
No, we're not going to do either of those things. We're not going to send you weird food.
Yeah. Well, unless you ask, we might. But is that everything?
I think so.
I think so. All the housekeeping, all the bookkeeping, all the keeping of everything. So without further ado, let us jump into Cilento. I was trying to make it rhyme. It doesn't.
I know. There's no way. Yeah.
Cilento.
But that's not it. It's
That's awful.
Cilento.
Okay.
But it's spelled Cilento. I was
Which
going
is
to say chee-len-toe. It's just because the C and the I together in Italian make the ch sound.
Yes. So if you see this spelled out and you're like, I'm going to the Cilento soon, it's actually the Cilento. And that helps.
Cilento.
Cilento. So the Cilento, if I may start.
Yes, please.
Part of me wanted to do this. That was a very heavy P sound. I apologize. Part of us wanted to do this. The two of us wanted to do this because we've been talking about the Cilento a lot on Reddit specifically, almost to the point of it feels like we run a Cilento Reddit account, not an Only a Bag Reddit account, because people ask frequently questions like, I want to get off the beaten path. Where do I go in Italy? Like, I really love Italy. I've loved everything I've seen in Italy. I've been to other places kind of off the beaten path, but I just want to kind of like, what's authentic Italy? And we've talked about this before, I think, on this podcast at least 5 or 6 times, that north of Rome is more used to tourism and more geared towards tourism. There's also infrastructure. There's also industry. There's a lot of it's a country up there in the north. You know, they got it figured out. They know what they're doing. In the south, it all falls apart. It's just, it's just vibes in the south.
We're held together by vibes down here.
We are just here, man. And there's that Rick Steves quote that would have been perfect for this, but it's like, basically like, it's like Naples is chaotic and it's noisy and it's like, it's crazy. And if you like it and you go further south, you'll love it even more. But if you don't like it and you go further south, you'll hate it even more. Yep. Which is just kind of to say, like, it doesn't get trashier more south of Naples you go. In fact, it will actually get cleaner than Naples. Naples is probably, we mentioned this before, the most trash placed in Italy. And that's just kind of part of that's Naples, that's just like
it's just their
aesthetic. That's in the sauce. Yeah. That's the aesthetic. That's like when they sat around the table, like, what are we going to do this year? We're going to do trash again? But I think going farther south, those English majors out there, when you go farther south, you will experience typically less trash, but still that same chaotic vibe. And the reason we want to do this before talking about renting a car is because a lot of the Cilento really can only be explored by a rental. You can also own a car, but I'm assuming you're not buying a car, I guess, for the purposes of coming to Italy. But so you can really only explore the Cilento with a car. And I say that because there is less public transportation infrastructure. There are buses, but the buses are often there's no public schedule. Why am I English all of a sudden? Oh, I think I said English majors out there and my brain's thinking schedule. There's no public schedule out. And I think even when we first started taking the bus 10 years ago, it was a piece of paper taped to a board and it had rained just repeatedly since they taped that piece of paper.
And I think that paper was probably 10 years old at the time.
So you had to kind of ask around, like, when does the bus come? And there's like 8:20. No, it was 8:10. No, they changed it. It's 8:45. And like, well, it's 8:30 now. So you either missed 2 buses or it has yet to come. And now, of course, some of them are online. Not all of them. Some of the buses you'll see only run a school schedule. They don't run a public schedule. It's only for school kids. Thankfully, the Train Italia system does run some buses down in the south as well, especially to pick up after train routes, because a lot of the train routes disappeared in the 80s when a lot of people just stopped taking the trains.
I would say that's a hot tip, and we should include that. We're always adding to the website, so pop on over there if you need further information. But a hot tip is that when you're looking for buses or public transportation in the South, I think of taking a bus because there are very few train stops. The train infrastructure was taken away, like you said, in the 80s, right? It was halted in a lot of the area where we are, so there aren't trains exactly where we are. There are some trains along the coast that get to some towns. But the hot tip is that Train Italia replaced that service with a bus service. So if you go to the Train Italia website and put in your location, your departure and your destination, you may be able to get a bus from the bus stop that is run by a train service. So that that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Perfect. Okay. It's also, too, you'll notice there, for at least one of the places we'll talk about in the Cilento called the Certosa, which is Italian for charter house, but nobody really uses charter house in English either.
We've said this before, I think one of the previous episodes, but I couldn't remember the word. I think we would call it a cloister.
Yes.
In the U.S.
Well, we would, I think, call it a monastery.
Yeah, sorry, a monastery.
Has the cloisters inside.
Yes, thank you.
And that is what it is. And there's one called the Certosa Link, which is, I believe, it's a bus that leaves the morning from Naples and goes back in the afternoon, specifically to the Certosa, because it is unreachable by pretty much any other form of transportation except car. There is no bus to the Certosa, despite the fact it is like the crowning jewel of the southern regions, sort of what you want to go see. Not the crowning jewel, a jewel. It's a small jewel in the back of the crown, basically. It's easily missed. But there's no transportation to it. And that is something that will come up in this episode repeatedly. The other thing I wanted to mention this car and why we're going to come out with the episode next week on renting a car, ideally with our other episode on the downfalls of living in Italy, is because when you are driving to southern Italy from like Rome, you'll notice that people understand how roads work in Rome. They understand how roads work definitely in the north. They are firmly aware of how a road works in the north. You get to the first exit or entrance, depending how you look at it, for Naples, and all of a sudden, it's this magical thing where you have cars driving down the lane, not the lane, excuse me.
Like the center line.
The center line or the
straddling 2 lanes.
Nobody can figure out which way that would be in. They've somehow turned 3 lanes into 4. Somehow, sometimes only 1. It's the most wild thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't understand it. It's beautiful, though. I mean, there are crashes. Let's be honest. There are crashes. People suck at driving. People checking their phones. I mean, you have delivery truck drivers on their phone, not paying attention. I'm like, this is an accident waiting to happen. We were on the bus yesterday coming back from Salerno to get Darcy's Permesso di Soggiorno. What a trip that was. And this guy in front of us in a car pulls a U-turn. We were on the bus. This guy pulls a U-turn right in front of the bus. I mean, 8 feet away from the bus. The bus slams on the brakes, honks, does that classic, what the hell's wrong with you sort of hand motion that every Italian is famous for. And the guy in the car is like, oh, come on, what do you expect me to do?
With the little prayer hands.
Yeah, with little prayer hands, like come on, man, I had him to pull a U-turn here in the middle of the street. All right, what am I going to do? And it's like, not do that, not endanger everybody for that.
Oh, man.
So I say that because people often say like, oh, in the north, it's you shouldn't drive, or in Italy, you shouldn't drive. And honestly, in the north, it's fine. It's a step below France, if I'm being honest. France was like some of those beautiful driving I've ever seen in my life.
It was incredible. People were so polite and rule following.
Everybody
knew
what they were doing. It was just like everybody knows how to drive. Phenomenal. I mean, this is coming from America where it's like everybody is aware on how to turn on a car. And then from there, it's just foot on the gas, hoping for the best.
Yep.
Through red lights. I mean, people fly through red lights in Savannah where we're from. People just, I mean, there's no... People go down the wrong way, the one-way streets, because, I just want to go a block. So I'm going to go block down the one-way street just in the wrong direction. I'm like, no, that's fine. That's fine. Just a little bit of
problem.
Vehicular manslaughter. So all that being said is, in the South, it's a bit like that. People will go the wrong way down a one-way street sometimes because they're just like, well, I need to go back a couple blocks. I'm like, okay, but like you could just get to the other side of the street. I'm going on about this thing. It's not important. Point is, to visit the Cilento, you should really have a car. And I will say, when you're not around, specifically around Naples and some of the more maybe metropolitan areas, it's really gorgeous driving. It is
absolutely
single lane, like each way kind of thing, not like one lane road, but one lane going each way. So I guess a 2-lane road. And a lot of it is winding. It's through mountains. So the Cilento, as we're going to talk about, it's 2 regions, but we're going to specifically talk about the Cilento, Valle di Diano, and the Alborni National Park. I don't know why I stuttered over Valle di Diano. That's where we live. That's like, I'm a nightmare that I stuttered over that.
Your brain really overthought that.
I know.
one.
I was like, oh, God, don't even. To be very clear, where we used to live, rather, actually, we went to the immigration office once and explained where we lived, and the guy was just like, total, like, oh, God, I'm so sorry. Why would you live there?
Like, let me fast track your paperwork.
Yeah, he's
I'm
like,
so sorry that you lived there.
This is the worst. And it was like one of those things like you ended up at a roast and he's just like going on and on about how bad this place sucks. I'm like, no. I also know that. Trust me. I live there currently.
But now we live in a different town.
Yeah.
And we talked to, it was a whole saga yesterday, but we ended up at the post office at one point in Salerno. And the post office worker asked where we live. And we said where we lived and we were chatting. And he's like, oh, amazing, beautiful, but why are you there?
Oh yeah, and everyone's question is not, oh, how'd you end up here? It's, why did you come here?
Yeah.
And they mean it politely, but they also mean like, God, why? And so that's a fun little tidbit about this area, basically.
I do want to note, just for driving, because I think, especially here, I'm a more nervous driver than you are.
Oh yeah, I'm one with the people here. I'm just like,
you have a more chaotic personality than I have, though. Just to be clear with everybody. But I would say that if you are comfortable driving around mountains,
sure,
absolutely 100% rent a car. If you like, I think of a lot of these mountains as kind of like driving in North Carolina.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
It's similar to me.
which is in the United States for dear listeners.
Yes, thank you. I find that scary. But if you're comfortable with that, 100%, you're going to be fine here. It's a lot less chaotic when you're driving in the national park area, like around the mountains. Even the coastal cities are not that chaotic, the driving.
No.
Where we are, just because we have like a high traffic strip mall area kind of down below.
That can be kind of a nightmare.
That can be a bit stressful, but it really is. It's tense and chaotic, but not nearly as bad as driving in Naples. I would never drive in Naples. That's
we
a
also
nightmare
drove in
for
Salerno once, and that wasn't that. That's again, it's one of those weird things. There's a couple of
chaotic,
roads,
but it's okay.
Yeah, and there's a couple of roads that like any paint on the road, so you don't really know where the lanes are.
Yep, you just pray.
But people kind of seem to get it. There's definitely a understanding that nobody wants to die in their car. Mm-hmm. So we all kind of work together in order to ensure that doesn't happen. However, you do sometimes see accidents, and 90% of the time it is somebody on their phone. I just say that because I honestly don't understand the Southern Italians being like clinically on their phones. Yeah. But they're always on their phones checking. I mean, I'm sorry. We have a friend. We're driving. It's nighttime. It's already a stressful drive. He thinks of an SNL skit he needs to show us. So he's driving, pulling up Instagram on his, and I'm like, put the phone away. He's like, it's fine. I'm like, you need to put the phone down. He didn't put the phone down. I just want to get to the end of the story. He didn't put the phone down. He still brought up the SNL skit, and we're both like watching this being like, what the heck is going on? Oh, this is funny. Thank you. But don't ever show us anything again while we're driving, please. God, please. So I just want to say like this culture of just like the car is just, you can do other stuff while you're driving. You're only using 5% of your brain. You might as well.
I will say too that this is not related to the Cilento, but it is 100% about where we live. People often don't wear their seatbelts because they're like, oh, I'm just going down the street. I'm like, you're going down the street 20 minutes. I think you should probably put on your seatbelt. Always put on your seatbelt. Babies are held in the front passenger seat. Like if a parent is riding in the passenger seat, they'll hold on to a baby rather than putting them in a car seat. Little kids ride in the front seat. Sometimes kids ride in the back seat and don't have a seatbelt on, so they're just like standing up and jumping around, putting their head through the little
over the thing that, like, console. I don't think car seats sell very well in Southern Italy because everyone's like, why would you use a car seat? That just seems like extra issue.
I love Southern Italy and I love where we live, but I think
anybody who's like grew up
nonsensical.
In the maybe 60s or 70s, it's sort of like the parent who like, the arm across them as a seatbelt kind of thing. I'm like, that's really Southern Italy. Honestly, it's stuck in like 80s. Honestly, is really where it's at. Like 80s in Southern Italy. It like never evolved from the 80s, both in style, both in culture, both in the way. I mean, everything is very 80s. It was like the peak time for like Southern Italy, hairstyles, everything. And then they're like, what if we just never left? And so younger people will dress like, whatever is cool today, but there's still the 80s vibe of just like, oh, we're going to go out wherever we want. We're going to do, it's just very, I was not born in the 80s, so I had no idea, but that's the vibe that we get from people who were alive and functioning in the 80s and who do remember it very well. And like, wow, this is like trapped. So the Cilento, Vallo di Diano, and Alborni is what we're going to be talking about today. And I say that because the Cilento coast actually does extend from like Salerno down to Sapri, but between Salerno and Agropoli, which means nothing to you people if you're not looking at a map, but just take my word for it, is a stretch of some of the most disgusting coastline you've ever seen in your life. It's basically like factories and farms. And
there's a lot of industry.
Yeah, it's not anything you're missing. It's not anything anybody's missing. However, there's some great tomatoes in that area, but that's really not what we're talking about today. We're talking about from Agropoli down to Sapri. And again, this means nothing to you unless you're looking at a map. But if you want to also write these names down as you hear them, because we will mention like little bits and bobs about them depending on what you are interested in. However, the first thing to note I just want to throw out there is the fact that most of the places from Agropoli to Sapri will be on the regional train line. I think some of them, maybe 2 stops on the fast train line, but a big thing to note is that between Reggio Calabria, which is the most southernmost point of the physical landmass of Italy, not Sicily, but the actual physical landmass, the southernmost point is Reggio Calabria. It is a city. And Salerno. There's technically a high-speed railway. However, I think the max speed there is 200 kilometers, but between like Salerno and anywhere else in the north, it's 350. So I think, I can't remember. These are the other statistics on the Trenitalia website. But essentially, even the high-speed rail in the south is not like high speed. It's
Is that because they don't have you have to have different precautions in place for that sort of high speeds, and they don't have that sort of infrastructure, right?
I think they don't have the infrastructure basically, and I mean it's something they're working. I will say, like, for those of you who are going to hear this in 8 years, they're very much working towards that, and then hopefully within a decade it'll be more advanced because they're realizing people do want to go to the south, and it's not just, I mean, it's something they should invest in, basically.
Yeah. And like I said, there's no train functioning here where we are in Valdiviano and extending on either side of that. But there used to be, and there are plans to make that happen again very soon. And what I mean by that is that in other parts of the world, maybe that would be happening in about 10 years. Here, hopefully in about 10 years, they actually have a blueprint and maybe
that'd be so nice.
have put down one railroad tie or something.
Oh, well, that's actually asking a lot. I don't know. I mean, maybe not. I hope not. So the Cilento, should we talk about beaches first or food?
Oh,
I know.
let's do beaches.
Let's do beaches?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you and I, we ramble about food.
We do ramble about food. And if y'all
Beaches.
have heard of this podcast before, we like our food. The beaches, I think part of the reason we wanted to talk about the beaches is I often see this question. Again, I say Reddit a lot because there's a lot of different, like Italy travel, Italy trips, Rome, Naples. There's all these different subreddits, and a lot of people have questions about like their itineraries. Like, I'm going to all these places, or the ChatGPT made their itinerary, which we're going to do an episode on. Do not use ChatGPT to make your itinerary. ChatGPT does not have feet. It does not understand how long it takes to walk for somewhere, and does not understand what it means to have feet that hurt. Anyway, it also really thinks you can do things like in superhuman speed. It's like there's no traffic. Point is, don't use ChatGPT. Also, the point is that a lot of I see a lot of questions about, like, I want to find, like, I've been to Italy before and I want to go back for the beaches, but I can't really stomach the Cinque Terre, Amalfi Coast, slammed beaches. I really also don't want to go to this sort of really built up resort town area. And in my opinion, and I think it's safe, I'd err on the side that I'm right. Love that.
Okay.
That sounded way better in my head. But I think Italy on a coastal level kind of gets boiled down to three things. You either have major seaports, Salerno, Genoa, Naples, Civitavecchia, Bari, things like that. So those are not places you probably want to go swimming necessarily.
I agree.
Then you have flat coastal areas in which they've turned into these quasi-resort towns. And I mean, like, kind of a Myrtle Beach type place where it's flat and beach. So it's just apartment buildings, it's strip mall areas. And I say strip malls, by the way, I'm kind of clear. We don't really have this kind of infrastructure a lot in the States, so it's hard to kind of picture it. But a lot of the traditional, I mean, it's medieval more than anything else, but let's just say Italian for this purpose, of infrastructure would be living on top, storefront in the bottom. And when you live in a small town, it made sense because you had, like, the cobblers next door to the person you buy food from, next door to the person you make belts or whatever it is, and they all...
Yeah, and of course you would live on top of your shop. That
exactly.
just makes sense.
And what's happened now is you have somebody built an apartment block, let's say it's 3 or 4 apartments stacked, like, tall, but then the bottom would be like, obviously things have gone with the times. So it's like a mechanic's office, or it's like
or a grocery store.
Or a grocery store. And then sometimes there'll be a doctor's office in your building taking up one of the apartment buildings or departments. So it's a little bit more, it's very mixed use, I think what it is. And it's one of those mixed uses that on paper sounds great, but in reality is just like a disaster of just...
And sometimes it works. So we recently had an Amalfi Coast episode. Go listen to that if you want to. And you can see in Maori, that is, I think, a bit of what you're saying.
That's the resort town.
Yeah,
feeling.
Exactly. And because they know they have a lot of tourism and a lot of tourism that isn't necessarily Italian as well, it looks pretty cute. I wouldn't necessarily want to stay there, but I have to say it looks pretty cute. And they, of course, have those mixed use buildings, but the outside looks nice and it's well kept. There are other places like Scalea that we've mentioned before. Not as cute. In a lot of the newer part of the town, still mixed use, bit more higgledy-piggledy.
A bit more falling apart for sure.
And one quick note, I might sound a bit different from here on out in this episode. I just turned down my mic. I was a skosh loud, so hopefully I wasn't blowing out your ears and I sound better now.
Hopefully I think we all sound great.
Okay.
I realize that we don't have a professional who does this for us. This is just us. So every episode is like a learning experience of just trying to figure out that that perfect like level of where does the mic need to be, and I'm much more naturally loud, as you might be able to tell, dear listener. So I have to have mine turned pretty far down because I get really loud when I'm excited, and then it sort of like blows out our eardrums because we can hear ourselves when we talk. So Maori, exactly. And that's what I mean by kind of resort town, or where the top is apartments and below is like cafes. And I think Maori almost does it the cutest possible way. In Scalea, it's not uncute. It's just some of it is just like, ugh, why would you have that shop there?
Exactly. And Maori is the ideal version of this type of infrastructure. And
it's a lot of it too, I will say, because Scalea, we've talked about it before, is one of those post-earthquake, post-80s rebuilding. So they, as a very, very brief history thing, in 1980, massive earthquake, it really hit the South. I don't know if it hit the North as much or if it was really touched, but the South was very much hit hard. There are still 15, 20, 40 different towns that are unlivable, mainly because it's just unsafe now. And a lot of these people moved to nearby, still quite close, but into a flatter area that isn't necessarily on top of a hill or on top of a mountain.
And into newly built buildings at the time that
that
were built for withstanding earthquakes.
And all within 1980s style, hence the whole trapped in the 80s thing.
Right.
So what happens is when you go to some of these places in southern Italy, this is like the ugliest place I've seen. Yes, the 80s were not a time for everybody that was a very good time.
Yeah, and they were not aesthetically pleasing in a lot of ways. Not every way, no shade, but some parts were not that cute.
Most parts, I think, the 80s were not great, I think. And so that is what they ended up with, a lot of architecture, and that's like kind of what you see. And I say that too because one thing we will, as we talk about the South more, I'm going to keep repeating it, but the North had money always, like historically, Venice, Siena, Florence, San Gimignano, Genoa, whatever it is,
Milan, Bologna, all the big places. Yeah,
they were always quite wealthy, especially in comparison to the South. The South had Naples, Caserta. There was the palace in Caserta, which we'll talk about in a different episode. It was being used to film a lot of movies in. I think actually some scenes of Conclave were filmed there, actually, and Star Wars, weirdly enough. But the South never really had that much money. So I say this because there's no. To go ahead and like spoil it now for you, there's really not going to be a hidden Siena somewhere. There's no hidden like place where it's clean and it's beautiful and it's just super flat and gorgeous and just like wow. Or not, I mean, Siena's not flat, but flat-ish and just really built up and exquisite and small. It's kind of like if it had space to be built up, it was very much built up overly built. Basically, if it was flat, and if it was mountainous, then it wasn't really built up because everyone was terrified for another earthquake. And so you end up with this idea that there's these small little areas that are small towns, basically, that have very little infrastructure and build up and stuff happening, or these just giant sprawling areas.
That's the thing. I think when you think about there is no Venice or Siena or Florence of the South. Which why would there be, like you're saying? There are we live in a beautiful medieval town, but most people moved out, and so there are just empty palazzos, which are just very large sort of mansion, I guess is kind of what we would call it in the U.S. But a lot of people don't live there because they need to be renovated. People are moving out of these towns, so it's not going to have like the cute little tchotchke shops and it's just not the same. There's a lot of beauty here, but it wasn't consistently moneyed, and therefore the cities are different,
And I think even on that note, and then I'll get to my third beach thing with my opinion of why I'm right. But I think even on that note is that when you talk about I use Siena and Tuscany a lot because that's like I feel like the ideal part of Italy for a lot of people. They imagine all of Italy to be like Tuscany. Right. And when you get local wine in Siena, 9 times out of 10, it's in a bottle. It has a cork in there. It's got like a nice label, and you're like, this is local. Here, it's in a plastic water bottle, and
not all of it, but sometimes.
99.
Okay, we've talked about this before, but so many people make their own wine here.
Yes.
A lot of people even have like family vineyards that have been in the family for generations. Even if they're not in the same town, they produce their own wine. They make it in what is essentially their garage. There's no car in there necessarily, but that's their wine producing space.
They move the car out. They're actually silly.
And a lot of people they use water bottles, but some people have, glass bottles with the little...
Oh, the little things, but I think only one around us actually has a proper production, quote unquote, which the labels and they actually sell to other people. I mean, a lot of people sell you wine, but I meant more like sell to like a restaurant or sell in a fancy sense. And But the same thing with sausages. It's much more likely to get, like, you can go to the butcher and get fresh sausages that he's made. You can also ask somebody who's like a hunter. They've made tons of sausages. They'll sell you some sausage or cheese. So it's like the local production here is more, who do you know who can get you in touch with somebody who makes something in their garage?
Right.
Not what fancy little shop sells this thing.
Exactly.
And that is just again, it's like, I think as an American, we're big on packaging. So it's kind of like, if this looks like it was handmade, we want it. But if it is handmade, sometimes we're like,
so if it's a little too rough around the edges, you're a little dubious.
Just someone made it.
But that's part of, we're going to get into food, but I think that's part of what makes this area so special, is that it is kind of stuck in the past, in that so many people, like almost every person that we know, makes their own something.
Yes, for sure.
And I grew up with grandparents who like canned their own vegetables and made their own jellies and all these things. And that's very much like how it has always been here, is that people they grow they have their own small farms. They make wine, they make cheese. They don't need to sell it to anybody. They just do it.
Right.
And maybe you can be friends with them and get some or buy some from them. You know?
Exactly. No, and I think that is the difference. It's like a major difference, I would say. And the last of the three. So we have the shipping port, we have the built up resort town on the water, and then the last but not least is the fishing village turned tourism hub, for lack of a better word, the Amalfi Coast, Cinque Terre. Anything that was basically had no other industry and very difficult to access, that used to be a fishing village, has now become like where you go to the beaches because that's pristine. And a lot of times, the Amalfi Coast, you can kind of see some of it. There's some places that had a marina, some places didn't. If anything, they would just pull the boats on shore. You see this a lot in the Cilento. Some places have a marina, some places don't. It's just simply pull the boat on shore. I obviously like those better. And we've talked about this before as well. And the big reason we wanted to bring up beaches is, in my opinion, Cinque Terre is beautiful. However, when you're at the beach there, you're going to see a lot of shipping traffic into and out of Genoa. The Amalfi Coast, gorgeous. Same thing, a lot of shipping traffic into and out of Salerno, even if you're in Capri, into and out of Naples. So it feels like these beautiful beaches are also right next to a major shipping lane, and it's a little bit like,
it's a little schifo.
A little gross. A little gross. I don't want to share like my beach with a giant shipping container. And the Cilento, there is like no shipping lanes anywhere near it. And not like, just because there's nowhere to enter. You can enter Salerno, but it's far to the north, and you might see one occasionally, but not really. It's not really a direct line from anywhere to anything. So what you kind of get is this really pristine beach, really pristine water. You don't get to see a bunch of big shipping containers, and it kind of has when people ask like, I want to go to this hidden beach, I want to go to this hidden area, especially if you want to go this summer, I'm like, that doesn't exist. But the closest you will find to, I think personally, is to a hidden beach or hidden area is the Cilento coast. And part of it is because it isn't a national park, so it's very unbuilt up in the sense of there are a lot of natural coves, a lot of little cliffs, a lot of hidden quote unquote beaches. And I also want to throw out there again, when I say hidden, I mean hidden from like Forbes or National Geographic.
Or The Guardian.
Darcy just read an article about hidden beaches in in Europe. I don't mean hidden from Italians. It's kind of like, just think of anywhere you live. Somebody who's grown up there kind of knows that place inside and out.
Right.
So
if there's a beautiful beach, it's been found.
Everybody knows about it. Exactly. And that's the thing. Like August, we told this to everybody, go listen to a Ferragosto episode. We're going to probably put another one out because not a lot of people listen to that one. That's fine. But a lot of people are still coming in August. And I'm like, I need to figure out a way to maybe we can title it, Do Not Come in August. Here's why.
Yeah. Another hot tip. If you have not planned your trip and you want to come to Italy this summer, do not come in August.
It is genuinely, unless
everything shuts down.
It's the big cities shut down and the small cities turn into these massive overrun sort of places of tourism. And we really can't, I just like encourage that if you want a relaxing or even interesting trip. But more than that is the beaches turn into madhouses. And we've talked about this in the Amalfi Coast episode. A lot of the beaches, especially in the Cilento, they are geographically
bigger.
Well, I was going to say, bigger. No, but like by the fate of geography, they cannot be expanded. So they are walled in by stone, and some of them are really nice really long strips of beach. I will say, like if you look at, I think north of Marina di Camerota, which is one of the few marinas, there's a really long stretch of beach, and in the summer they put out these semi-permanent lido. And if you want to know what a lido is, we have a beach episode. You can go listen to that from last year. But essentially, it's like a little hut, a shack. They sell food.
Bar, cafe, shack.
Exactly. They have beach umbrellas, they have chairs, and the entire beach will turn into that essentially. But it's still on one end rock wall, on the other end rock wall and forest. And that's most of the Cilento is you really can't, only so many people can fit on a beach, basically.
Yes.
And there's a famous one, Cala Bianca, which is I say famous, again, it's famous like here, not famous like anywhere else, but it's a beautiful white sand, gorgeous, hidden, idyllic, just like unbelievable beach. It can only hold about 45 people, maybe 60 if you're really cramming in there. And it's like a half-hour walk from the parking lot on a trail. So that's the other, and not all the beaches are like that. I want to be very clear. If you're thinking like, I want it a little bit more relaxing than that, I will say places like Sapri, places like Scari, or Sapri especially, it's on the train route, so it's easy to get into town. The beach is in town. You can go to the beach and you can go have a, I don't think if there's a marina, it's a very small one. So it's not like you're swimming against the boats or people fishing or anything like that. So it's really kind of calm and chill. You can go have a coffee.
And I think that the swimming area is not near the boats. They do have a small marina, but they're not necessarily connected.
Okay. And I think, and so that is the biggest thing. So the Cilento, it also has a lot of the blue flag beaches in Italy, not in Italy, excuse me, in Campania, which blue flag just means, on one hand, it means very clean beaches. On the other hand, it also means they have access to like hygiene services or health services, or if you got stung and if you need to go to somebody. However, I will say again, a lot of the Cilento is just hidden beaches you can only find by swimming or sailing there. So yeah, that's not like, if something happens when you're on that part, you're out of luck. Don't need medical services when you're over there. But renting Darcy's looking at a lizard that just happened to walk by our little recording area.
We have a resident lizard who lives on our balcony and sometimes goes back and forth, and I just spotted him.
We need to find like a way, make a little tunnel for this guy to sort of safely go from one end to the other, a little traffic light or something like that. And
it's just him though.
It's just, well, I don't want to like come out and scare him and then he like jumps off the edge. So yes. I need to, like, he knows when we're coming, or we know when they're coming. And then but basically on that note of even like renting or using a boat in Scario, which is another beach town in the Cilento, really beautiful. And it's popular for especially a lot of Italians in the area to go there. And I think it's for €5, €6 a round trip. They bring you out to one of these couple different coves, and then they bring you back in the afternoons, basically. And you can get on any of them. Once you have a ticket, you can get on any that go out, any that come back. And that's a really nice way, if you don't have a boat, obviously, why would you, to go to some of these more hidden, secluded marina coves, little areas, basically. So there's more on the beaches, I will say. There's probably a lot more information on beaches, but this is just kind of to say, like, if you're looking for a really hidden, really quiet, idyllic, just relaxed, again, in August, all bets are off, genuinely. That's not a thing. Yeah. That's just, it's a madhouse on the coast in August, but but honestly, every other month besides that, as long as it's not a weekend, then I would definitely recommend the Cilento.
Absolutely. And if you're someone who has already been to the Amalfi Coast or Rio Maggiore, or if you haven't, but you're not looking for that, I don't want to say Instagram experience, because you don't have to post something on Instagram, obviously, to want to see that quintessential part of Italy.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more where locals go, I highly recommend the Cilento Coast. Like we said, there will be people there. You're not going to find probably a hidden beach where you're all by yourself. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll find a little outcropping where you're by yourself, but they are less touristy and just really serene. You can have like a calm, relaxing trip on this coastline. You
absolutely can. And I think kind of fits. There's a few other things we want to talk about the Cilento that isn't beaches and food.
Because there's so much more.
There's so much more. But that does really actually feed into the food really well. And it's something I do bring up a lot on Reddit, because a lot of people do, again, just like you said, I've been to Cinque Terre, I've been to the Amalfi Coast. I want to try somewhere else. Where do I go? And I often recommend the Cilento, because one of the biggest issues people have with the Amalfi Coast, besides the crowds, is the fact that it's expensive. The restaurants, the food. And it's not like amazing often.
A lot of it's touristy.
And it makes perfect sense. I want to be super clear. There's no like, it's high rent. It is difficult to get stuff out there. I mean, you're reliant on...
And you have to make what people are going to be eating. And if a lot of people are tourists, then you're going to make what tourists want to eat. And
that's the thing, like, the classic spaghetti meatball type thing. That's not a thing in Italy. There's no spaghetti meatballs, but that might be on a menu because that's what tourists expect to see. Or it might just be like pizzas and things that you really probably shouldn't really want. You should have them in good places, basically, not necessarily touristy restaurants. And I will say, sort of like the benefit of going to the coastline where other Italians know is a good coastline. So I say, like, when there are Italian tourists, there are tourists from around here that go there, but also just from other parts of Italy will go to the Cilento Coast, is the Italians tend to have a less of a
Tolerance?
patience or tolerance for bad food.
Oh yeah, high bar for food, very low tolerance for food that is not local and or authentic.
And I think that's the
Good.
thing. Like, there's a lot of, like, the restaurants can't be, like, for instance, obviously there's a lot of seafood restaurants in along the coast, and there's a lot of hate for seafood restaurants that serve frozen seafood, or for restaurants that don't serve, like, I mean, anything that's not fresh necessarily, or just like not local.
Right.
Like, why are you serving Norwegian cod? You have literally the Mediterranean right there. Go literally catch anything and put it on the plate and I'll eat it. So I think there's definitely a different tolerance for that, if that makes sense. The pasta dishes, I mean, a classic simple pasta with tomato sauce here in our town we are, in the region we are, really should not be more than €5 or €6. Really. And when we go to Rome and we see like 9 or 10, we both feel a little like, oh God, come on. I mean, I get you have to pay rent, but okay. And then you go to the Amalfi Coast and it's like 15 or 16. You're like, that is ridiculous. And I will say that's the benefit about being, again, like in sort of Scario, Sapri, Polinuro, things like that, where it might not be 5, but asking 15 for it is just laughable.
And I think one of the other benefits, one of my favorite things about food and restaurants here is because people are not as used to Western and Eastern, any tourists who are from not Italy, essentially, they're not used to that. And so people are just excited to share their food, essentially. So if you're a tourist, people are excited to share your food with you, their food with you. There we go. And I think we talked about this in a previous episode, but we went to a restaurant. We did a little day trip for your birthday. Went to a little, was it an agriturismo?
No, I think it was a restaurant, yeah.
Okay. And the owner of the restaurant came over and he's like, okay, I see that you ordered this bottle of wine, but I have to tell you, I have this other one. Got it from my friend. I mean, it's a real production. It wasn't just like a random person. It has a label and everything. And he was just like, I have to tell you, I really think this one's better. Like, I don't want to offend you, but I think this one's better. Do you want to try it? And it was wonderful. And we were all thinking we're going to get, price gouged. And it was the exact same price. He was just so passionate about sharing what he thought was the best thing that they had that paired with our food. And like everything was, not to romanticize every part of this meal, but it was as local as they could make it. Part of it was their own production. He knew this wine was good and he was just passionate about it. And I think that's something that you find so much in this area is that people are really passionate about the food that they make and are really excited to share it with you. And it's going to be local and fresh, most likely.
I think that is the biggest point of order. I don't know. The biggest point of thing to keep in mind is that people do take a lot of pride in what they make and take a lot of pride in what they serve. And I mean, some of it's a little bit, obviously not everyone, not everywhere, these are generalizations.
Right. There you will find frozen fish. You will find risotto made with the frozen mushrooms. Also, y'all, risotto's not from the South, so probably don't order that.
That's the weird thing. I will say it's a very much a northern dish, and so a lot of places will have risotto on the menu, and sometimes it's fantastic because it's not like impossible to find here. It's just sometimes it's good, but you're like, well, but it could have been better.
Yeah.
Could have been not risotto. And I will say also there are truffles here, which is really nice, and which are also from the area. Like, I mean, you have to kind of eat them the day they're found.
Right.
So there are a few restaurants that will occasionally have truffles on the menu because they'll have found some that morning kind of thing. And so there's a little bit of that kind of, again, I will appreciate that they're not wildly expensive.
Yeah, and there's so many restaurants, like you're saying, where if something's not on the menu, but they've found something that morning, like asparagus or truffles or whatever it is, often the owner of the restaurant or a waiter or waitress will say, we have this special thing. It was found this morning. Do you want this special thing? And sometimes, like with the truffle in the town over from where we went one day, the chef, I guess he was excited that he had these truffles and he's like, here's what I'm going to make for you. And it wasn't on the menu. He was just like, I found these. They're amazing. I'll make this thing, which is going to be great. Do you want that? So it's just really cool.
And we're also vegetarian. So it was kind of like one of the things where I think he was putting truffle with either boar or some other sort of meat. And we're like, oh, but we can't eat. It sounds amazing. We can't. He's like, well, I'll just make like a pappardelle with butter and truffle and this and that. And he's like, has what that's, but he was like kind of like, I don't know. It was one of the things that was very, very sweet because he still wanted to share the truffle, but also wanted to make sure that we weren't eating meat around it. And that is something I will say that even though the Cilentinian food is a little, it's cool because it's people, there's a cafe restaurant in New York City. I want to say it's Cafe Flora.
I don't know.
I can even stick in the description.
Yeah, let's do that.
And the owners are actually from this valley. And they were recently, like I think last year, they're mentioned in the Michelin magazine as like not with a star or anything, but just sort of like up and coming and, you know, thing to watch out for. And they make sort of a lot of their dishes are either Cilento dishes or based on the Cilento dishes. And it was exciting for a lot of people here who, you know, it's just kind of fun to see like the dishes that their parents make or their grandparents make in New York City doing well and well enough to get some sort of noticing, you know, and I think that was a big kind of moment where, I mean, anytime this whole region, I mean, this whole area, the Cilento, Valle di Diano, Alburni, anytime it's mentioned, like there was a New York Times article, it was more of an op-ed than anything else about the Certosa, the monastery, and people were sharing it everywhere. I mean, people
Here?
every here, and so many people sent us the article, like, did you see this? We're famous, and it was fantastic. Genuinely, it's like amazing because people do really want to share. And I think that's not really related to food, but I mean, we could honestly keep talking about food, let's be honest, but it is related to the fact that a lot of the North that you and I have experienced, I would say, is that people are comfortable with tourism, but it's almost like everyone's a little over it. Mm-hmm. Even people in the tourism industry, I mean, say over it, it's been 200 years of tourism, 300 years of tourism, let's be honest, I would be over it too, but it's not like here where people are so unused to it.
Right.
And it's so new and so fresh still, like to the point that there are a lot of times the towns don't get tourism. Like, I mean, you'll stop in the car and they're just like, who are you?
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, it's just interesting. We talked about it in the last episode, how like it was sort of the talk of the town for the day while there was those 2 Japanese tourists in town at the thing. And people were just like, oh my God, people from Japan know where we live. This is amazing.
I think it's good to put in at this point is that if you are especially if you're taking a car around the Cilento or honestly, probably anywhere in Italy, if you stop in a small town and, you know, to get a coffee, to get some gas, whatever you're doing, and people are staring at you, it can be very intimidating. It is 99.99% because they just want to know who you are.
Yes.
And as soon as you talk to them, they're going to be some of the kindest people you've ever talked to. But whenever you're not used to it, it does look a bit like they're like neighborhood watch, and they're going to let everybody know that you're an outsider.
I've never seen Children of the Corn, but it feels very like that's what everyone's staring at you, and you're like, am I going to leave this town alive?
Exactly.
I will also mention too that it is the weirdest experience for everybody. Don't worry, that you'll hit them with the old buongiorno or buonasera when you're walking by them, which is good morning or good evening, and they don't say anything sometimes, and you're just like, excuse me, I just said buongiorno. I'm from a small town in Italy. You're from a small town in Italy. We both know you respond with a buongiorno. What are you doing not responding to me? It is weirdly, because even again, we walk around with my mom's partner, and he'll say good buongiorno, and when they don't respond, and we all look at each other like, what the heck is wrong with these people? Like, that is standard Southern Italian behavior.
But usually people will say.
Yes.
Yeah,
no, almost
nice.
always. Yeah. And then that's the thing. I mean, that's when you hit them with a buongiorno, and then it's like, oh my gosh, this person. Oh, we're going to talk for days. I mean, I don't know what they're saying. They don't know what I'm saying. I'm speaking English. They're speaking dialect. It doesn't matter. But it is a different experience. And when I guess actually the only 2 other things, if I may just kind of go along, because I was at 47 minutes, and as much as I want to talk about food more.
I have 2 food notes though.
You have 2 food notes, girl. Hit me the food notes.
Okay, one is just that Pioppi is a great word to say.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
But Pioppi is on the Cilento coast. It is where, okay, so you all probably heard of the Mediterranean diet, and it has been around for a very, very long time. However, I have his name in the notes. Ansel Keys, who is American, wrote about this diet, and then it became famous. Essentially,
and
right?
The Blue Zone diet is essentially what it became.
Thank you. And he wrote about it while staying in Pioppi, right?
Well, and it's interesting, very interesting backstory. He actually, if I'm not mistaken, created the MREs for the United States Army, which is the little food rations. And so he's kind of into food in general, and ended up retiring in Pioppi. And while he was there, his housekeeper was the one who cooking meals, and she would cook him English sort of American meals. But then for her husband, it would be like, you know, she'd make the mozzarella and the salami and the trout or whatever it is, you know, just like the normal things. And he was like, can I get that instead? Can you make that for me instead of like the, you know, hash browns, or I don't even know what she was, you know. But so he started eating this sort of Mediterranean diet, and realizing a lot of people there were living long, and chalked it up to the food and the fact that that was part of the whole diet. It was the fact that there's still a strong community, the fact that even people in their 80s are still doing moderate, not so severe, I was like moderate to severe exercise. It's still doing some severe exercise today. moderate to heavy exercise.
Yeah,
But I mean, like they're splitting
called.
wood and they're, but because, I mean, we have neighbors
They're
who,
active.
oh God, they're active. Oh my God. I feel like so just lazy when
Our little neighbor, she's not really our neighbor anymore, but because we kind of live.
we moved. She didn't. She's
Yes,
there.
exactly. Our neighbor Maria, this lady is like 4 feet tall.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean,
on a good day.
Yeah, and she carries, I can't even explain to you how many groceries she carries up and down. I mean, a hill, a mountain, honestly, back and forth to her house. She's always gardening. She's always doing these things. And then every time we see her, she's shopping. So I offer to carry groceries for her. And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, good, because I don't really want to carry your heavy groceries that's heavier than the groceries I carry, you know?
Yeah. But she also, like,
she's so strong.
She also, because they have a fireplace like a lot of people, so she's always out there splitting wood, and she's always like carrying wood. And she, like last year, year before, she fell, broke her back and her wrist. Everyone was terrified. She was not as terrified as other people. She was carrying wood, but like with it was a whole thing.
Yeah, she was carrying wood with her broken wrists. I'm not laughing at her, obviously.
No, just
I'm
sort of
laughing
like,
because she's like the strongest person I know.
And obviously, like, it's one of those things you can't stop. If you stop, it's like it spells
Right.
the end kind of thing. But it was just this sort of. It's also, I will say, there's a difference in. It's I don't explain. I mean, a lot of people explain it. It's living in the States. I think I came up and I was grew up in one way where there's not. I mean, genuinely, there's a very little hardship in the sense of like. I mean, there's a lot of hardship. I want to be very clear and everywhere. But I meant like here, heating is wood, right?
Right.
So if you don't have wood, you're not warm. It's not like I'm going to turn the thermostat and then pay extra and have to put on a credit card next month. It's, but I have wood. Oh, but it's not cut. Okay, so I have to actually physically be out there cutting wood to be warm. I mean, it's just, I think it's just one of those things where there's no arguing. There's no it's not like like, I think there's like a lot of self-arguing yourself. Like, I'm making a nightmare of this point, but I guess I'm like thinking the States, and I think I was growing up is like, if you're cold, you put on the heat. If you're hot, you turn the AC, and you rationalize it to yourself. Like, well, I'll pay a little bit more, but at least I'm comfortable. At least I can sleep at night. At least I can blah, 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 blah. At least I'm not paying extra for jackets or whatever it is. But here it's like, you want to be cold, that's fine. I think you and I spent one winter where we tried using the fire. We didn't use anything else except the fireplace. And it was it's like the winter I developed tinnitus. It was the most terrible winter we've ever experienced, just because, it's 30 something degrees and you put in the
It's not pioneer living, but it is close sometimes.
Certainly descended from pioneer living. And I mean, I say that we say as two very soft Americans.
Oh yeah, for sure. Soft, privileged Americans.
Yeah. But it's just interesting because it's so much of like, if it's a rainy, chilly, cold, icy day and you're like, I have no food. It's not like, well, I might get in the car and just go. No, you're going to go up the hill and you're going to try not to slip and die on the way up there to buy food, but not anything you want, because there's only like 6 things at the store because everyone else is, it's just.
And some people live off their land.
Yeah.
So no matter what, you got to go out and farm every day for whatever seasonal. Right? You have to plant appropriately. You're fully dependent on what the weather does and how the seasons work. If it's in the wintertime, a lot of people still don't have washing machines for clothes. So even if it's in the winter, you're washing your clothes and you're going to get cold washing your clothes.
The first few years we spent here without a washing machine, and your hands are free. It's like for 6 months your hands are freezing.
Yeah, and your clothes, if you put them out, you can't put them outside because it rains most of the time and it's too cold to dry them anyway.
We definitely do, so we don't care about that.
Yeah, but it takes like a week for things to dry sometimes, and like you said, a lot of people don't have. We luckily have a washing machine and the hot water heater is electric. So
Correct.
We're not cutting wood. Again, soft Americans we are. But some people, like you said, their heating system is based on their fireplace. So they're chopping wood every day or spend weeks chopping wood to prepare for the rest of the year and have to make a fire and maintain that fire every day.
I will say also my mom's neighborhood sucks so much. It seems like, not really. They seem like they have money because they have money, but they have their hot water is still fire-based. So even in the summer, we're talking like 98 degrees, 30 something degrees Celsius. They're chopping wood and bringing it inside to put in a fireplace to heat up water to do something with. And I'm like, it's hot enough. Just stand outside with some water. It's fine. What are you heating up water for? Like a shower? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I will say that it's part of it is
to the shower, not to the ridiculous.
Yeah.
Whatever.
No, I figured.
I still take hot showers in the summer.
Of course. No, I'm not a crazy person. Excuse me. I'm not doing without my hot shower. I am a soft, privileged American, as we've established. But it is, I will say, this is all to say, like in the South specifically, it really does. We talk about it's the 80s. Sometimes it's the 1880s. Sometimes it's the 1980s. It really is a toss-up, and it's amazing anytime you go to the immigration office and like, why do you want to be here? And you're like, honestly, I ask myself that question all the time. I have never been so cold. I have never been so hungry. Okay, I have no farmland. I don't know why I'm here either. So it's fun for everybody. But Pioppi was one, and then you want to talk about Acharoli.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know that much about it. I'm not a scientist or a food scientist. However, in Acharoli, people live for a very, very long time. There are a lot of centenarians. Is that what they're called?
Not centaurs, but centenarians.
Yeah. So far, I haven't seen a centaur. Still holding out hope. That would be super cool, but also very scary. So a lot of centenarians, a lot of people over 100, and many people chalk it up to the rosemary that grows there. It is supposed to be like 10 times more potent, 10 times more profumato. What's it? Smelly?
Yeah.
Good smelling. And it's good for, I think rosemary in general is good for blood health and circulation, but it's supposed to be like super good and keep your arteries strong and your blood moving like you're a 20 or 30-year-old.
Which is interesting. I mean, because again, that's what a lot of the people in town claim, and I think there were scientists who did studies on the rosemary, finding that it was actually much more powerful than standard rosemary. I don't know what that means. In terms of like, I don't know what they would test it against, but it is quite a strong varietal of rosemary. But they do have, I think, the most centenarians per capita kind of thing. It's like of every.
It's like 1 in 60.
Something like that.
1 in 60. 1 out of every 60 people is over. I think it's 90 years old or something like that.
Oh, I think it's 100.
Is it 100? Okay.
Yeah. No, I think because they have something like 100 and something living people who are over 100.
Who are 100. Okay.
Which is fascinating. I mean, yeah, again, just in terms of, and it might not continue. It might just be a fluke. It might be there was something amazing in the water 100 years ago. It's not there anymore.
And there's also a lot of rumors that like people stay active.
Yes.
But like adult active at nighttime is what some people claim to chalk it up to, which is like really cool. Great if
every
it's true.
Every retirement home in the world.
Yeah, that's true. But great if true, but that one's kind of more of a rumor.
I love it. Like big if true.
Yeah.
So moving on from Darcy's activities in the nighttime of these centenarians, we're going to talk about Pestrum very quickly. Okay. And we're going to do a whole episode on Pestrum. If you have not heard of Pestrum, it is one of the Greeks' original settlements in southern Italy. It is possibly one of the best preserved settlements in southern Italy. If you've heard of like Agrigento, which is in Sicily, then you've heard of another one that has an amphitheater. It looks beautiful. This one has 3 fairly intact temples. It has a museum. It has an old Greek town. It has the Roman town on top of it, and then the Lucanian town before the Roman town, but after the Greek town, all kind of on top of each other. A lot of ruins, really quite beautiful. We talked about this earlier and talking about how the fact that like there's public transportation in the south, but it's not really connected to tourism. There's a train to Pestrum.
Because it is also a functioning modern town. Because
next to it, is the functioning. The historic part is not a functioning modern town, to be clear.
It's right. But there is the modern part of Pestrum, which is a functioning modern town.
And the train goes to nowhere. It goes to a station that is not in town and is not near the historic town. It's like a mile away from anything you need to be next to, which is really super. And so but I think that like really is this sort of, when you look at why doesn't like the South have more tourism, it's because somebody was like, we should put a train line with a stop going to this thing so people can see it easily. Like, that sounds good. But if other people want to use it, they're like, well, let's move it like a mile away from anybody. So everybody's equally
far away from
it. And then that passed all of the checks and balances that were created. Mm-hmm. And that's how we have the entire south of Italy, I think. But essentially, if you like anything, if you really liked Pompeii, for example, it's not quite in the same preserved in the sense because Pompeii is like preserved in time because of the ash, but it's really...
And Pompeii is quite large. The Pestrum, I imagine, is actually equally as large, potentially. Again, not a historian, but a lot of Pestrum is still underground. It has not been excavated. And a lot of modern buildings are on top of that area. But it's a beautiful, wonderful park where there are, like you said, 3 temples that are still intact. And there are also a lot of, I guess, what would have been like homes and buildings around that where the bases are still intact. And you can see like mosaics on the floor and just walk through and imagine. I like to imagine that I lived there when I'm walking through. Yeah. It's really, really cool. And they have a museum. They have I always say it's new, but it's got to be in the last year or so. They have a new part of the museum dedicated to Hera. At least one of the temples is a Hera temple. And the museum is very, very cool.
It also has, interestingly, something called the Tomb of the Diver, which is it kind of actually, it's interesting in Salerno and in the south. It's a bit of a you kind of see the imagery not often, but not infrequently. But
and certainly on postcards and magnets.
Exactly, certainly on postcards and magnets, and it's a painting, a figurative painting of a figure, a man diving off of a kind of a stone plinth, a stone wall potentially into the water. It was found on the underside of a tomb, like the lid of a tomb. So if you're lying in the tomb, you could see it basically. And it's interesting because it is arguably the only existing example of a figurative painting from the ancient Greek period. And they think that it's because the Etruscans, which this Greek area would have bordered the Etruscans, often did a lot of figurative painting, especially as it related to their funeral sort of tombs and whatnot. So they think they might have borrowed it from because didn't really happen that much that we can see in ancient Greek. It was all like other things, you know. And so, but some people argue that's Lucanians, which took over Pestrum after the Greeks. However, Lucanians had a thing for horses, so they painted a ton of horses everywhere, and there are no horses in this picture. And everyone's like, no, that's not Lucanians. But I think it's fascinating.
If it were Lucanians, they would have put a horse in there.
Exactly, and that's kind of the thing. Like, there's no horse people, there's no Lucanians, and so centaurs. See, we're back to centaurs once again. And so it's fascinating, though, in terms of just, again, if you're into art history, anything like that, it's just it's one of these kind of somewhat forgotten places that there's no real money to do any real exploration, but it's beautiful. It's lovely. It's very much worth the visit. It's like an actual proper, you have to pay an entry fee to get in kind of thing. It's a proper thing. It's not like just...
It's not terribly expensive, though.
No. And you're not like stumbling across ruins in your own time, though.
And a great place to go if you are planning a trip along the coast. It is basically just slightly inland from a coast, and you can easily get there by car.
And Pestrum has fantastic wine.
Yes, they really do.
They really do. I mean,
they're
that's
doing
ridiculous.
Great on the wines.
Yeah. The other two things I wanted to mention very quickly. One we've talked about before is the Certosa. It's the monastery. It's in Valle di Diano. It's supposed to have the biggest cloisters in the world, which I think is, you mentioned cloisters earlier. And that is, I think, the area inside a monastery where the monks would have walked around in meditation. It is supposed to be the largest in the world, or at the very least the largest in Italy. There's one somewhere else that's supposed to be also pretty big, but I don't know if how people are measuring things. It feels like when it's measured, you know, it's a static number, but there's some discrepancies around these static numbers. So this one's supposed to be the largest in Italy at the very least. It does have quite a bit of tourism. It also has some free days. I only say it too because we've visited it a lot, and it's really genuinely a beautiful area. I mean, it's gorgeous in terms of architecture. It's gorgeous in terms of just bits of history. It's been there. It's below the town of Padula, and it's been there longer than the town of Padula. So it's just interesting to note that it would have been sort of predated a lot of the towns in the area. I mean, it's not ancient Roman or anything, by the way. It's very much a Christian monastery, to be very clear. Carthusian, to be specific. But it's just kind of a fun little, if you're in the area, it's worth the trip, basically.
Absolutely.
If you're in Rome, it's not worth the trip. But if you're in the area, it's worth the trip. It's just something fun to see. It's something fun to explore. And then the last two ones are both cave related. We've mentioned these before. One is the caves of Pertosa, which is in Pertosa. It's kind of a lovely just cave system. If you like spelunking, not actually spelunking, I'll be very clear. There are routes, not routes. What are those little metal tracks called? They just walk on the metal scaffolding.
Like catwalks.
Yes. You're not
Yeah, you're not actually spelunking. You're not climbing down into little cave holes.
But once a year, if I'm not mistaken, they put on a production of Dante's Inferno inside the caves. They being some theater company, not 6 people who happen to live in Pertosa. I think it's an actual production.
A troupe,
if you will. And it's kind of fun because obviously you get to do Dante's Inferno in
a cave.
What looks like hell, I guess. It's kind of fun. And then last but not least is, we mentioned this before, is Sant'Angelo Fasanella, which is a very tiny town in the Cilento, in the mountains. And it's just interesting because they have a really beautiful intact church inside of a giant cave. And it's really beautiful. It's lit up, and I mean, it's a kind of a gorgeous thing. It's still active in the sense they do still hold mass there and things like that, and weddings and whatnot.
Yeah, you can have a wedding. We went, and the guy's like, "Hey, you married? Do you want to have your wedding here?" He really tried to upsell us on it.
Coffins?
Yeah, it's super weird.
There's just some corner where they're just coffins falling apart with bodies, with bones falling out.
It's not just some corner. I mean, it is sort of, but you have to walk
to
a certain point
corner
to see it. Yeah, it's not
just in
here's a beautiful cave and you're going to have your wedding, and also there's a random skeleton next to you.
I still don't understand just that they're just those are just some people.
Yep.
And then they're like, anyway, you guys, you want the next part of the tour. And then it was like, okay, that was fun.
Yeah, we
And
need to go back and figure out what
figure that
that's
out.
about. Not
But
figure out. Ask someone to tell us. We're not going to,
Yeah, just start deducing it.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is lovely. I will say, though, again, it is open sometimes. It's not open all the time. We went to the cafe and asked if it's open. They said no. They called like Giovanni, their friend, who brought the keys and brought us in to see it. But there also happened to be other tourists who happened to be in town at the same time. So it was all like 8 of us or something like that seeing these things. It was ridiculous. You have to call, the cafe owner's friend to get the keys. So this is the southern Italy.
Yes.
This is what it is. But though there are other places in the Pertosa, or excuse me, in the what am I talking about? In the Cilento, you've even saw there's things where you can go like river rafting and paddling and kayaking, and there's a lot of they're trying. I want to say they're trying to create like some sort of semblance of tourism. But the biggest thing is if you were like, I want to know what Italy would have been like 100 years ago, it's southern Italy. Honestly, It's the Cilento.
100%.
A very hard to touch area that hard to touch in the sense of like you can't physically put a train line through the Cilento. You cannot physically do certain size buses into the Cilento. It is a very untouched place in a lot of senses of the words. There are some abandoned towns like Rocinio Vecchio, which there's a guy that lived there that claims to be the last living there person.
Actually, you might have seen him because it was not this past Christmas time, but I believe last Christmas time, he went kind of international, or viral, I guess. Not he, but
I
someone
might have seen him or somebody else might have seen him. You said you might have seen him.
Sorry, listeners might have seen this man.
I'm sorry. Okay, I was like, I definitely saw him in person there.
Yeah, we did see him in person,
okay,
yes.
Sorry.
I think doing his laundry, just out and about. And, but he always dresses up as Santa Claus around Christmas time. And he lived in this town, but he passed away. I believe like around last Christmas, and I think some photos of him went viral around that time.
Okay, because I know that I say claim to have lived there because a lot of people in Rocinio, not Vecchio, just Rocinio, the town nearby that is now the new town, basically like, no, he lives here in the winter and most of the time. He just basically lives there sometimes, and he's like
And some people claimed that he wasn't one of the original residents, that he moved in after the town was abandoned. But he was he seemed like a nice person. He liked to give impromptu tours. Absolutely a character. And he was doing his laundry outside the little apartment that he was staying in. It looked very unsafe. It's not.
Oh, for sure.
You cannot live in this town. It is absolutely uninhabitable. It's not safe.
But you will also notice too, I think it's only since the 80s, because there's still they had some of the houses at least had electricity. It's still you're like, oh, it's a town, and then people just left. I think there's still abandoned cars. No, sorry, that makes it sound creepy. Just clearly somebody parked the car that no longer worked in their garage, and they're like, all right, I'm gonna get that later, and they never went back for it, kind of thing. Not like.
And there's still some small farms up kind of inside the town, I guess. I mean, it's like in a lot of towns here where people still graze their sheep,
and they still try to keep it clean. I mean, they still send people there to kind of do the to make sure if you want to take the walks around or whatever, so it's not overgrown essentially. So I think that though, those types of things, like getting in a car and just driving around sometimes, is you're gonna just experience so many crazy places and just be like, I had no idea. And then but again, it's one of those things I would not say it's worth coming to Italy just for that. It's more, you're going to Italy anyway. You definitely want to be based in the south. You've already seen the north. And, basically I'm thinking if somebody said, who's the Cilento for? Who's the south of Italy for? I'd be like, even if you've already seen Puglia, or Puglia feels a little bit too touristy, because the idea of Puglia seems beautiful. It also just, again, seems like...
Heavily touristed, though.
Heavily touristed. Everybody knows Puglia. So it's kind of like if you want to kind of get off the beaten path and just explore small towns and just kind of be like, what is it actually like living in Italy? And especially this would be the closest.
If you're someone like me who, if you like road tripping around the U.S. and seeing the giant ball of yarn on the side of the road and sort of weird, wacky roadside things, there aren't that, but thinking about Rocinio Vecchio, there are so many things that you can travel around by car and just see weird things that are not as heavily touristed as a lot of other parts of Italy.
Well, I mean, genuinely, and I mean, we will round up this episode, by the way, y'all, and in case you're just like, this is going on a while, they're going to get to any point? Not really. But there is no, because I say, on the bus between here and Salerno, you will pass by castles that are falling apart, monasteries that have started to crumble. All these sort of really beautiful things, but with a car, you can reach all of them. They're not gated. They're not, ticketed or anything like that. It's just, it's a monastery.
Don't go trespass. But...
No, but we went to the monastery that was falling apart because it's just clearly people can go to the monastery and fall apart and go kind of poke around in there. There's a bunch of castles you can just kind of go poke around in because it's there's no roof anymore, and I mean, be careful. Obviously, it's a falling apart building. It definitely might crumble. But it's just fascinating because it's just, had this been in the north, there would have been some sort of sense of like, oh, this is the castle of so-and-so, and it had some money.
And
they
orderliness.
And some of it now, it's just like, nah, that's just like somebody's rich project from 500 years ago who died, didn't leave it to anybody, or left it to 800 people. Nobody really owns it. Go for it. And I think that's a big part of being here, is that there are so many little things that you can only find in a car. And again, it's not necessarily worth coming to, but everybody we know who has come to the South has enjoyed it.
Yes.
Like tremendously. They've been like, I didn't realize any of Italy was like this still. This just feels overwhelming and amazing. And just, basically I thought it was all kind of prepackaged sort of, experiences and bite-sized this and blah, 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 blah. But because I don't know, sometimes it feels like trying to hunt for something new in Florence or Rome or Siena. It's just like not even a needle in a haystack. It just feels like a very artificial needle in a haystack, Like, what is the last so-and-so in Rome? It's like, no, that's just, come on. It's Rome. It's been there for 2,000 years. Everyone's explored every part of it already, kind of thing. So I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of favoritism there.
But that is the Cilento. At least I'm not going to commit to doing lots of other episodes on the Cilento. However, we live here, and inevitably we will talk about it again.
Oh, for sure. And probably we'll do something at least on Pestum.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
that seems worth it. And that seems like something you probably should go to visit if you're in Salerno and you want to do a day trip somewhere.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, next week we'll be back for another downsides on how to live in Italy, as well as hopefully how to rent a car and some things to pay attention to while renting a car in Italy. With all that being said, thank you all so much for your ears, your time, and your patience. I have been Nathaniel Mellor.
And I've been Darcy Melton. Tanti abbracci.